In today's video, I'm going to talk about a cross-sectional survey that I did in 2015. I created a questionnaire with various health issues on it, sent it to local vape stores, and had it posted online. From there, it kind of snowballed into being transferred to different um, websites, and over a period of 6 months, I had 572 respondents to this health survey. Uh, I was looking at that and trying to find out what kind of health benefits people got after they stopped smoking and went to using electronic cigarettes. It was interesting that there was quite a span of time in there where people had been quit for less than 3 months, less than 6 months, a year, 2 years, all the way up to, I think I had one respondent who had been off of cigarettes, using electronic cigarettes, for 7 years. So it's quite a group of people, a fairly good large group of people. I felt it was large enough to make some analysis of what they said the health benefits were that they achieved. I looked at things like hypertension, asthma, respiratory illnesses like acute and chronic bronchitis, just recurring respiratory infections, shortness of breath, and diabetes. And what I found was fairly stunning. What I found for hypertension, and you have to remember, for true benefit, you got to compare what you find to what is in the general population, as well as with the smokers and with the vapors. So I tried to look at those things where I could find the statistics on general population prevalence of these illnesses. I would use that as well. Initially, on hypertension, the prevalence in the smokers that I surveyed was about 30.1%. Now, the population in general has about a 29% rate of hypertension, so that's a little bit higher than the average population. What I found was when people had switched to electronic cigarettes, within the first year, that prevalence dropped from 30.1% to about 15.5%. So literally, hypertension was cut in half in the population of people who had switched from smoking. After 2 years, the rate remained dramatically diminished. It bounced up a little bit, but hypertension can develop in people who are not, who aren't even smokers. It had bounced up to 17.3%, but still far below the initial rate of 30.1% that I found in folks who were smokers. As far as asthma, there's been a lot of discussion about asthma in the literature, and the sensationalistic headlines make it to the media. Is kind of blown out of proportion. Depending on the duration of use of electronic cigarettes in the population I surveyed, the prevalence was anywhere from 13 to 18% initially in my group. Now you got to remember the background prevalence. The population in general has a rate of asthma that occurs at about 6.6%. So 13 to 18% in smokers is significantly higher than the population. Well, in the first year when people switch from smoking to use of electronic cigarettes, that rate dropped down to 7.7%. And if they were able to persist in using electronic cigarettes for 2 or more years, the rate in that group dropped down to 6.67%. Now that's essentially equal to the background population. So basically, switching from smoking to electronic cigarettes, your risk of asthma drops down to no greater than the general population. Respiratory illnesses, I grouped acute and chronic bronchitis together. It's just easier to put it together that way. I know they're very different diseases, but sometimes people can't distinguish between whether they've had a chronic bronchitis or an acute bronchitis. So I just put them together just to have some consistency with this. Interestingly, in the first year of use of electronic cigarettes, the rate was reduced by 61%. So very significant improvement in acute and chronic bronchitis. And if they were able to sustain it for 2 or more years, it was still at a 47% reduction over the initial survey group of smokers. So dramatic improvement, anywhere from 50 to 60% decrease in acute and chronic bronchitis in people who can sustain use of electronic cigarettes. Shortness of breath, also called dyspnea, D-Y-S-P-N-E-A, but the P is silent, so it's dyspnea. was reduced by 67% at 2 or more years of use of electronic cigarettes. That's pretty significant, just the simple symptom of shortness of breath. Recurring respiratory tract infections, just upper respiratory infections, that type of thing. Includes a lot of different types of respiratory infections. In the first year of use of electronic cigarettes, the rate was reduced by 60%. And if they were able to sustain this, the use of electronic cigarettes for 2 or more years, the rate of recurring respiratory tract infections dropped by 80%. So again, significant improvement in with use of electronic cigarettes over when these same people were using cigarettes. With this group of people, I also had a fairly sizable number. I think there were 71 people who responded who said that they had never had any health problems while they were smoking. And that's important to notice because you want to also look and see if there's a downside to it. What kind of health problems might these people develop if they start using electronic cigarettes that they didn't have when they were smokers? So I had 71 people who had no previous health problems. And during the course of this survey, I found that none of those people developed any health issues at all related to the use of electronic cigarettes. They didn't report any new health problems since they started vaping. So that's, again, very significant. People who are fine before are fine afterwards. One of the interesting things that I found in this also was there was a reduction in the incidence or the prevalence of diabetes in this group as well. And that kind of surprised me because you don't typically think of diabetes as being related to smoking. So I had to do a little bit of research on that. What I found was that cigarette smoke actually causes your body to be resistant to insulin. It makes it not work as effectively. So it can certainly aggravate and make diabetes harder to control. And the other part of that was interesting is that if you come off of cigarettes, just go cold turkey, it makes diabetes even harder to control because now you're gaining weight. You're not generally eating as healthy as you should. And diabetes is very much dependent on a good lifestyle, not smoking, eating right, losing weight, exercise, and that type of thing. So if you could just quit smoking, your diabetes takes about 20 years to get back to the population rate of control of diabetes. What I found with this study is that 25%, I only had 17 people, and 4 of them said their diabetes was either basically under control or easier to control than what it had been while they were smoking. I actually found another study that looked at that. It was a study by Constantino Farsalinos in 2014. He had 19,000 people that he surveyed worldwide. My reduction in diabetes incidence was 25%. What he found was a 41% reduction in the rate of diabetes in people who were using electronic cigarettes as to prior to use of the electronic cigarettes while they were still smoking. Food for thought. I thought this was kind of an interesting study. I tried to get it published, but I'm just a doc in a single clinic. I'm not at a research institution. I had it on hold at one of the publications. They wanted me to get some co-authors. I was unfortunately not able to find a co-author. So I just went ahead and pulled it out of the journal and went ahead and released it to the blogs. And I want to thank the folks who did post it in their blogs. This again shows with these major health issues that people are concerned about with smoking, and the sensationalistic headlines you get with some bad research that comes out about how bad vaping can potentially be, if you actually take the time to measure the health outcomes of switching from smoking to electronic cigarettes, what you find is that there's a dramatic benefit in all of the things that we measured. Since I did the survey, other people have put out papers related to the same reductions. Ricardo Pelosa has done some, Constantino Farsalinos has done some studies as well. The one thing that I haven't seen them do a detailed study on, though, is the decreased rate of diabetes in people who switch from smoking to electronic cigarettes. It'd be interesting for somebody who is associated with a research institution to try to put something like that together and see what you can actually find. Just as an aside, my wife and I went up to Milwaukee last year for the premiere of the movie A Billion Lives, and I ran into somebody who was also there for the premiere, and we were chatting. she had also mentioned that she was a pre-diabetic, and when she switched to use of electronic cigarettes from smoking, her pre-diabetes resolved. So again, I think this is a significant issue that needs to be looked into in more detail by the true research community. Appreciate everybody watching my videos. I've got quite a few that have been doing quite well. A couple of them fairly controversial, and I appreciate the comments. I try to take the time to comment to each of you. If just a fair warning, if you make a comment and you haven't taken the time to research what you're saying, I will call you out on that. I don't have any problems with doing that. If I'm wrong, but generally I'm not. Yes, I am old. I am a grandpa now, but only for a few months, and I don't look like Brett Favre. Probably more like Marty Feldman. But appreciate all the comments that you guys have put comparing me to different people, and hope you keep watching my videos. Thank you.